Number 1. When I was 14, my family and I fell on hard times. We got kicked out of our house and ended up in emergency housing. Basically, we went to a charity who found us a home that we were able to rent for $100 a month, but only for 3 months. That summer, my mom and stepdad separated temporarily, and my 3 younger siblings would go to my stepdad's for a week or so, and then come home back to my mom and me. This house was fucking creepy. It started off with just that feeling, like something isn't quite right, that you might not be the only person in the room. In the day, that's all it was, the feeling that something was up. Your instincts pricking at you. I tried to ignore it, but as soon as dusk arrived, shit would start happening. More than once, I could hear this static-filled music playing, but I couldn't find the source. It just filled the halls. I heard whispering and went into my sister's room. In the open closet, a pair of eyes looked at me and disappeared. My brother spent one night in the house and didn't come back. In my room, I could never win. On one wall, a mirror. When I flipped over to face the window, I watched tall shadow figures pace in front of it. In my mother's room, the same shadow figures paced in circles around her room. One night, she and I sat up for 2 hours in her bed, watching these shadows. She was strongly religious and didn't know what to make of it. Number 2. Up until I was about 8 or so, I lived in a really old house that since the beginning of time had been bounced around from relative to relative until eventually my mother had been handed over the keys. It was basically a shithole. 2 stories, a collapsed balcony on the 2nd level, mold and mildew all over most of the ceilings, one tiny bathroom, and the toilet was outside, overrun with frogs and spiders and whatever other kind of hellspawn the Australian outback would throw at us. I was terrified as a child, scared of basically everything. I'm much better now and have much bigger balls than most of my friends, if I do say so myself. Nonetheless, I would probably have to put the blame on this old house of mine. I remember as a child that I would always have the same dream. I'd start in the kitchen, no idea how I got there, of course. It was during the day, probably later in the afternoon. Nobody was around, so naturally I'd go looking for my mother and father. I'd go to all the normal places. Mom wasn't in the laundry room or the lounge room. Dad wasn't on the patio outside or up in the back of the chicken coop, and my sister wasn't around either. I was starting to get worried, thinking that everyone was gone and they'd left me alone, until I heard a noise above me coming from the 2nd floor, where the bedrooms are. Relieved, I darted towards the stairs and jumped on the first step. Then I felt it. There was something in the back of my head making me stop. Legs still raised up as I prepared to move on to the 2nd step. Something telling me that I shouldn't go up there. Of course, this thought was running rampant in my mind. Don't go up there, don't go up there. Stay down here, don't go up there. There's something up there. Finally, my leg dropped before I could reconsider. I pushed myself up those stairs, and even though I didn't want to anymore, I couldn't stop myself, only slow down. Each step up was taken at an agonizingly slow pace, and I wanted so bad to just go downstairs and find someone, run to my grandparents' house and stay with them until my mom was home. But eventually I rounded the corner, leaving only the last few steps leading up to the floor ahead of me. There was nothing there. I couldn't see anything in the stairwell. I started getting hopeful at this point. Maybe it's okay. Nobody's here. I was just imagining things, and it's gonna be fine. I'm still taking the slow steps up when it appears. Something's there. I can't actually remember what it was, and I never could after I woke up, but it was horrifying beyond belief. And I would always try to close my eyes, because that was my thing as a child. If you can't see it, then it can't see you. But I could still see it. I couldn't blink. I couldn't shut my eyes. It was like my eyelids weren't working. I would even try holding my hands in front of my face, but I still couldn't block it out. I could see through my hands, and I couldn't do anything. I was frozen, unable to do anything except stare at this thing all but a meter away from me. Whatever I saw, whatever I did, for those 8 years I was at that house, I had to force myself up the stairs, day or night. It was horrifying. My mother sighed and tried to reason with me. My father growled at me and called me a coward, and my sister just laughed and said I was retarded. But every time I had to go up those stairs, as soon as I hit the top of the stairwell, I had to stop and make sure that I could cover my eyes with my hands or that I could shut my eyes. Of course, it would terrify me most when I'd go to blink and wave my hands in front of my face, and it wouldn't work, and I'd realize I was dreaming. Number 3. A few years back, I rented an apartment from a friend of mine. He had recently bought it and had it completely renovated. He put it up for sale but couldn't find a buyer, so I offered to rent it in the meantime. After moving in, I realized there was something wrong with the lady next door. She was about 45, but she looked much older. She would sit up all night listening to Christian radio shows and talking loudly to someone. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep, so I went over to her place and asked her to keep it quiet. She opened her door, and I got a quick peek. Her walls all had crosses painted on them in different colors, and words like Jesus and angels scribbled everywhere. The windows were painted black, letting no light in at all. It was damp, yellow-stained 50-year-old carpets, dog shit and cockroaches everywhere. No dog, though. I asked her to please keep it down. She just looked at me and shut the door. Then she turned up the radio even louder. The next night I have my girlfriend over. I wake up in the middle of the night and see a shadow of a person next to the bed looking at us sleeping. I think I'm hallucinating, as I usually do in the dark when I'm sleepy. But then the shadow starts talking. It's my neighbor, and she's holding something in her hand. She broke it during the night, and who knows how long she stood there. You should lock your door at night, she says and walks out. The next morning I hear someone making strange noises below my bedroom window. It's my neighbor talking to herself in tones. She has a plastic bag in her hand with her rotting dead dog inside. It's hot as hell outside, and I can smell death from the bag. At this point I'm scared shitless. She's obviously very insane. I go upstairs and knock on another person's door and ask what the hell is going on. This guy is as scared as me. Apparently she broke into his apartment one evening as well, while he was watching TV with his kids. He got up from the couch to get a snack, only to find her behind the couch staring at him holding a power drill. Now I know what was in her hand. At this stage, I'm basically shitting myself. I call the cops, and they know all about her. Apparently she has a violent schizo, and she hasn't taken her meds, but they can't force her or enter her apartment without her permission because she owns it. The only thing they can do is get her when she goes outside. I sit up for the next 2 days waiting for her to run out of cigarettes. When I hear her leave at 2 a.m. to go across the road to the 7-Eleven, I call the cops. They have 3 cars and a special van over in less than 2 minutes. They restrain her and throw her in a van and drive off to some institution, and in less than a minute, it's like she was never there. I've never seen her again, and I still have nightmares about her looking at me in my sleep. Number 1. When I was 14, my family and I fell in hard times. We got kicked out of our house and ended up in emergency housing. Basically, we went to a charity who found us a house that we were able to rent for $100 a month, but only for 3 months. That summer, my mom and stepdad separated temporarily, and my 3 younger siblings would go to my stepdad's for a week or so, then come home back to my mom and me. This house was fucking creepy. It started off with just that feeling, like something isn't quite right, that you might not be the only person in the room. In the day, that's all it was, the feeling that something was up. Your instincts pricking at you. I tried to ignore it, but as soon as dusk arrived, shit would start happening. More than once, I could hear the static-filled music playing, but I couldn't find the source. It just filled the halls. I heard whispering and went to my sister's room. In the open closet, a pair of eyes looked at me and disappeared. My brother spent one night in the house and didn't come back.